She demanded a black teen leave the pool, confident no one would question her. Until the girl's father showed up, and the entire country club went silent. The sun hung high over Wellington Country Club, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. It was the kind of place where the air smelled of freshly cut grass and sunscreen, where laughter echoed off pristine cabanas, and where families, certain kinds of families, lounged beneath striped umbrellas as waiters in crisp uniforms refilled their drinks. For Imani Carter, stepping into that world felt like stepping into a different universe. She wasn't unfamiliar with wealth. Her father, Governor Everett Carter, had ensured she grew up with opportunities. But country clubs like this had a different energy, one that made it clear who belonged and who didn't. Still, she wasn't nervous. She had an invitation. Her best friend, Madeline Henderson, had been begging her to come all summer. "You'll love it," Maddie had promised. "The pool's huge, the food's amazing, and trust me, the lifeguards are worth the trip alone." Imani had laughed it off, but deep down she hesitated. She knew the unspoken rules of places like this, knew the way some people glanced at her when she walked into a room, how their eyes lingered just a second too long, questioning her presence. But Maddie was relentless. And today, there were no excuses. The Hendersons' car had picked her up that afternoon, Maddie grinning beside her in the back seat. "I told Mom you were coming, and she said she'd add you to our guest list," she reassured. "It's no big deal." Imani had smiled, appreciating the effort. "You sure they won't have a problem with me being there?" Maddie scoffed. "Of course not. My parents love you," but that wasn't really the question. And they both knew it. The club's entrance was a sprawling Mediterranean-style building, its grand columns gleaming under the sun. As they stepped inside, cool air conditioning kissed their skin, a stark contrast to the humid Georgia heat outside. The receptionist barely glanced up as Maddie signed them in. No questions, no hesitation. Imani let out a small breath. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. Within minutes they were out by the pool, the scent of chlorine thick in the air, the sound of splashing and idle chatter blending into an easy summer soundtrack. Imani set her bag down on a lounge chair, slipping off her sandals. The water looked inviting, shimmering beneath the sun. Maddie nudged her playfully. "Told you it's nice." Imani smirked. All right, you win." She stepped toward the pool, dipping her toes into the cool water. The relief was instant, washing away any lingering hesitation. But then, just as she was about to lower herself in, a voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, young lady." It was sharp, clipped, the kind of voice that carried expectation, the expectation of obedience. Imani turned, blinking against the sunlight. A woman stood before her, hands on her hips, her expression carved from stone. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, a pastel tennis dress that looked like it had never seen a court. Imani had seen women like her before. "I'm sorry, but this pool is for members only," the woman said, her tone making it clear she wasn't actually sorry. Imani blinked. "I'm with Madeline. She signed me in." The woman's eyes flickered to Maddie, then back to Imani, as if weighing her next words. And just like that, the air shifted. Something told Imani this wasn't just about club rules, but she wasn't about to back down. For a moment, the only sound was the lazy splash of water and the distant chatter of families enjoying their afternoon. Imani met the woman's gaze, steady and unflinching. She'd seen this expression before. The tight lips, the assessing stare, the slight lift of the chin like she was measuring something. Maddie jumped in before the silence stretched too long. "Mrs. Lancaster, my mom signed Imani in as my guest. She's allowed to be here." Mrs. Judith Lancaster barely spared her a glance. "I don't recall seeing her name on the list," Maddie scoffed. "That's because my mom handles it online. You can check with the front desk if you want." Imani stayed quiet, reading the situation. The woman wasn't looking for an explanation. She was looking for an excuse. Mrs. Lancaster's gaze flicked back to her. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but rules are rules, sweetheart." Imani felt her jaw tighten. "I understand that," she said evenly. "But I was signed in properly. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't allowed." Mrs. Lancaster let out a breathy, amused sound, shaking her head slightly. "I don't mean to be difficult, but we have policies for a reason. It keeps things organized." Organized. Right. Maddie's face was turning red. This is ridiculous. My mum. It's fine, Imani cut in, voice calm but firm. She wasn't about to beg for permission to be somewhere she was invited. She reached for her bag, ready to walk straight to the front desk and shut this down herself. But then, a few feet away, she heard it. A murmur. Low voices. A couple in loungers nearby, watching. The lifeguard shifting awkwardly on his perch. They were waiting, watching. She knew this moment. Had lived versions of it before. Mrs. Lancaster wasn't just questioning a name on a list. She was waiting for Imani to second-guess herself, to feel out of place. And for that reason alone, Imani refused to. She looked Mrs. Lancaster in the eye. "You can check with the front desk," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." A pause. Then, before the woman could respond, Maddie grabbed Imani's hand. "Come on," she huffed, tugging her toward the cabana. "I'm so over this." They walked away, shoulders squared, heads high. But the weight of a dozen eyes followed them. And somehow, Imani knew this wasn't over yet. Imani and Maddie settled into 2 lounge chairs beneath the shade of a striped umbrella. Maddie was still fuming, arms crossed, her foot tapping aggressively against the concrete. "I cannot believe her," she muttered. "Who even is she? She's not management. She doesn't run this place." Imani exhaled, rolling her shoulders to shake off the tension. "She's just another woman who thinks she gets to decide who belongs and who doesn't." Maddie sat up, eyes flashing. "That's so messed up. And she literally saw me sign you in." Imani let her head rest against the chair. "It's whatever." But it wasn't. The stares still lingered. She could feel them, hovering at the edge of her vision. Some people were pretending not to notice. Others were openly watching, waiting to see what happened next. And then, just as she was about to suggest they head for the snack bar and shake it off, a voice boomed across the pool deck. "I told you, she needs to leave." Imani sat up. Mrs. Lancaster was back, and she wasn't alone. A tall, wiry man in a navy polo stood beside her, his club name tag gleaming under the sun. Security. Maddie shot to her feet. "Are you serious right now?" Mrs. Lancaster's smile was tight, triumphant. "If there was a miscommunication, I apologize," she said, voice all sugary politeness. "But non-members can't use the pool. It's a simple policy." The security officer hesitated. His eyes flicked from Maddie to Imani, unsure. Imani slowly stood, keeping her hands loose at her sides, keeping her expression neutral. She wasn't about to let this woman see her flinch. "I already told you. I'm a guest," she said evenly. "Maddie's family signed me in." Maddie stepped forward. "You can literally check with my mom," she snapped. "This is insane." The security officer looked uncomfortable. "Miss, if there's been a mistake—" "There is no mistake," Maddie cut in. "Why don't you check the system, instead of just taking her word for it?" Mrs. Lancaster pursed her lips. But before she could respond, a deep voice interrupted. "I think that's a great idea." Everything stopped. The security guard straightened. A hush spread through the pool area. Conversations died mid-sentence. Imani turned toward the voice, her chest tightening. Standing just beyond the lounge chairs, hands in his pockets, was Everett Carter, her father, Governor of Georgia. The man whose name was etched onto the Wellington Country Club donor wall at the front entrance. And from the way Mrs. Lancaster's face paled, she knew exactly who he was. The tension was thick enough to smother the entire pool deck. Every pair of eyes was locked onto the man who had just spoken. Everett Carter wasn't an intimidating presence by nature. He wasn't the kind of politician who barked orders or flaunted his power. But there was a weight to him, a kind of quiet authority that commanded attention. He stepped forward, his polished shoes tapping softly against the stone pavement. His gaze flicked to Imani, checking on her first, before landing on Mrs. Lancaster. "I'm sorry. I don't believe we've met," he said, his voice calm. "You are?" Mrs. Lancaster swallowed hard. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but no words came. The security officer, now visibly uncomfortable, took a step back, clearly recognizing the situation for what it was. Everett's eyes didn't waver. "You seem very concerned about my daughter's presence here. I'd love to know why." Mrs. Lancaster finally found her voice. I was just ensuring that the club's policies were being followed, Governor Carter," she stammered, her earlier authority crumbling. He nodded slowly. That's fair. I'd expect nothing less. But tell me, did you personally check the guest list before asking my daughter to leave? Silence. Imani watched the woman's face shift, her thoughts scrambling for an answer. Everett turned to the security guard. Did you check the guest list before getting involved? The man hesitated before shaking his head. I was just following up on a complaint. Everett's expression didn't change. I see. So an accusation was enough to call security on a teenage girl? Mrs. Lancaster let out a nervous laugh, waving a hand. Governor, this is just a misunderstanding. Everett tilted his head slightly. Is it? She floundered. I thought she might have come in without signing in properly. Maddie had had enough. That's a lie, she snapped. You watched me sign her in. Mrs. Lancaster's jaw clenched. Everett let the silence hang for a moment before exhaling slowly. This club prides itself on being exclusive, he said, his tone unreadable. But I'd hate to think exclusion and discrimination are being confused for policy. At that, Mrs. Lancaster's eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. Governor, that's not what this is. Everett raised a hand slightly, cutting her off with a polite but firm gesture. I'm not interested in excuses. Imani was invited here, signed in properly, and has been nothing but respectful. Yet somehow, she was the only one singled out. The pool deck was dead silent. Even the lifeguards had stopped pretending to look busy. Mrs. Lancaster's face was flushed now, her fingers twitching at her sides. It won't happen again. Everett held her gaze for a beat longer, before offering a tight smile. I know it won't. Then, with a small nod to the security officer, who looked like he wanted to sink into the earth, Everett turned to Imani. You good, sweetheart? Imani finally exhaled. Yeah, Dad. I'm good. Everett nodded once. All right. Then let's enjoy the rest of the day. He gave Mrs. Lancaster one last glance before walking over to an empty chair and taking a seat like nothing had happened. But Imani knew. Everything had changed. The weight of the moment lingered like a storm cloud that refused to pass. The entire pool deck seemed frozen in place, unsure of what to do now that the air had shifted. Mrs. Lancaster was still standing there, her carefully constructed composure cracking at the edges. Her fingers twitched as if she wanted to smooth her already perfect dress, to do something that might undo the past few minutes. But there was no fixing this. She wasn't in control anymore. With nothing left to say, she turned sharply on her heel and walked away, her sandals clicking against the pavement. The security officer hesitated before muttering an awkward, "Enjoy your day," and following after her. Maddie let out a low whistle. Well, that was satisfying. Imani didn't respond right away. She was still processing everything. Her father had stepped in, and the moment had ended in her favor. But it still happened. She still had to prove she belonged somewhere she was invited. And that's what sat heavy in her chest. Everett leaned back in his chair, pulling out his phone like he hadn't just dismantled a woman's authority in front of an audience. But he wasn't scrolling. He was watching her, waiting. She finally sat down, exhaling. This kind of thing happens a lot. It wasn't a question. Everett set his phone down. More than you know. Maddie frowned. I just don't get it. My parents have guests all the time and nobody says anything. Everett nodded. Because no one expects them to be here. He turned to Imani. You weren't doing anything wrong, but you were visible. And for some people, that's enough to make them uncomfortable. Imani stared at the water, the sunlight bouncing off the surface. You knew something like this would happen, didn't you? Her father sighed, rubbing his jaw. I hoped it wouldn't. But I wasn't surprised when it did. Maddie shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. I'm sorry. I really thought... She trailed off, her expression pained. I thought we were past this. Everett gave her a small, patient smile. A lot of people do. Maddie looked at Imani. I hate that you have to deal with this. Imani finally met her eyes. I hate it too, but there was no point in pretending. This wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. Still, today was different. Today, Mrs. Lancaster was forced to face what she had done. Really face it. And all those silent onlookers, they saw it too. And that mattered. Even if it didn't change things overnight, it mattered. Everett stretched, breaking the heavy silence. Now, he said. Are we going to keep talking about this woman? Or are we going to enjoy our day? Maddie perked up immediately. I vote for food. Imani, you have to try the club's fries. Imani let out a soft laugh, the tension in her chest loosening just a little. All right. Let's go. As they walked toward the snack bar, she felt the shift. Small, but there. She wasn't the one shrinking away. And that made all the difference. The sun had started its slow descent by the time they finished their food. The tension from earlier had faded into the background, but it wasn't forgotten. Sitting at the picnic table near the pool, Imani swirled her lemonade with her straw, watching the ice spin. Maddie was talking about something ridiculous, probably another one of her wild ideas. But Imani wasn't really listening. Her father, sitting across from her, noticed. Still thinking about it? Imani glanced up. Yeah. Everett leaned forward slightly. What part? She sighed. All of it. The way she looked at me. Like I didn't belong. The way she doubled down even after Maddie told her I was a guest. She shook her head. It didn't matter what I said. She had already decided I was in the wrong. Everett nodded slowly. That's how people like her keep their power. They don't ask questions. They make statements. They don't need proof. They just need enough people to go along with it. Imani thought back to the way the crowd had watched, but said nothing. The way security had stepped in without verifying anything first. She knew he was right. Maddie, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. I should have called my mum the second it started, she muttered. I could have ended it sooner. Everett shook his head. It's not just about stopping it. It's about seeing it for what it is. Maddie looked up. What do you mean? Everett's gaze was steady. A lot of people don't recognize what's happening in front of them until it's too obvious to ignore. That's why so many people were just watching. They didn't want to get involved, because they didn't think it was their problem. Imani exhaled. But it was. Her father gave a small smile. It always is. For a moment, no one spoke. The air was warm, filled with the hum of laughter and conversations from people who hadn't given the afternoon a second thought. Finally, Everett stood, smoothing his shirt. You handled yourself well today, Imani. She blinked. I didn't really do anything. He raised an eyebrow. You didn't back down. You held your ground. He gave her a knowing look. Not everything has to be a fight. Sometimes, just being is enough. Imani let those words settle. She knew he was right. Maddie smiled. So, fries and milkshakes again next weekend? Imani chuckled. You're ridiculous. Everett shook his head, amused. I'll let you two plan that. I've got a state to run. As he walked toward the parking lot, Imani watched him go, her mind still replaying the day. Mrs. Lancaster had wanted her to feel small, but she didn't. She wasn't just invited. She belonged. And no one was going to make her forget that. Because no one should have to prove they deserve to be where they already are. If you made it this far, you know this story isn't just about one day at a pool. It's about how moments like these happen all the time. It's about how easy it is for some people to be questioned, challenged, and made to feel out of place in spaces they belong in. So next time you see something like this happening, don't just watch. Say something. Because when you stay silent, you're letting it happen. If this story made you think, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your voice matters. Use it.